Welcome, Doomtown fans, to my review of The Light Shineth. This is the next big box expansion for Doomtown, and in this video we're going to be looking at all of the dude cards that are in the box. Before we get into the dudes, I'm excited to say that we have 3 new outfit cards to look at. The first one is called the Sanatorium. It's a 4th ring outfit. It's 18 plus 3 income. It has noon boot, choose your dude and another dude at the same or adjacent location. Your dude either gets +1 influence or +1 huckster skill. The other dude gets -1 bullets and value. I have to admit that I'm a little underwhelmed with this, but I can definitely see how it would be useful. The -1 bullets is pretty much always going to be good, and the -1 value on your opposing dude, that's going to make it easier to do all of the value-oriented effects that we've used pretty much since the beginning with 4th ring. Now this +1 huckster skill or influence, that's also going to be really good. The biggest thing I'm seeing is that the combination of the huckster skill and the -1 value might make something like Soul Blast a little easier to pull off on the opposing guy. The really hex-heavy decks in 4th ring have always had to have really high draw structures, and this +1 huckster thing might make it a little more permissible to lower your curve a little bit, maybe opening up the range of values that you could play within your draw structure, or making it a little bit more permissible to play a few lower values. +1 influence is pretty much always going to be good, although Oddities of Nature I think has a lot more potential when it comes to the total influence. My biggest overall remark with this thing is that it's by far the easiest to use. It seems very general use, whereas both of the other outfits have some abilities that aren't quite as easy to get the value out of. The original one requires you to leave home and cast a spell, which can sometimes be difficult, especially if your opponent has control of the town square. Also, like the Oddities of Nature, you clearly have to build your deck in a certain way to get the most value out of the Abominations thing. This is pretty general. You could pretty much build any type of 4th ring deck and be able to use this power. I think it is really going to help with the hexes, but it could also do pretty well with some abomination oriented stuff. So I see maybe like a hybrid of those two ideas working really well in this, where you're not really focused on maximizing the outfit power as much as just playing a lot of good and general use cards. The next outfit is for the Law Dogs, and this is Abram's Crusaders. It's an 18 plus 3 income as well. Your deputies with a melee weapon have +1 bullets. Your deputies with a miracle have +1 influence. Noon boot, one of your dudes gains the deputy keyword. This outfit power seems really strong to me. It fills in a lot of the gaps of the card pool. I think really the core ability here is this deputies with a miracle get +1 influence. So we're looking at Andrew Burton. This guy is a staple even outside of the Blessed decks, and he is both a deputy and a Blessed. So we're going to be able to pretty easily get the 1 influence out of him. Now the deputies thing, that also has a lot of really good things going on in the card pool. Rafi Hamid is absolutely bonkers. His shootout ability is really, really solid. And it particularly combines well with the Legal Instruments card. Not to mention faster on the draw is one of the better shootout-oriented effects if you have lots of deputies. And it's going to be a lot easier to pull that off with this noon boot ability on our outfit. I could also see considering starting Abram Growth, especially his Experienced 1 version where it's both a deputy and Blessed. He has 7 cost with 1 upkeep. That's doable but pretty pricey. I think I would rather start kind of a larger posse of smaller dudes. This is a pretty sweet outfit. It's definitely going to require you to build your deck in a very specific way. You're really going to want to focus on getting the most out of miracles and deputies, but I think there's already a lot of incentive that we've been doing with decks, and it seems to me like there's different ideas that I've been doing with the arsenal that I would just straight up switch to this outfit for. The last of the outfits is for the Sloan gang. This is called Den of Thieves. It's a 17 with +3. Your starting posse may contain up to 2 grifters. Your grifters each have their cost reduced by 1. Then it has React Boot. When draw hands are revealed, add 1 bounty to your grifters to increase your hand rank by 1. Your hand is considered illegal. Gain a Ghost Rock. This is certainly cool. I'm not sure if I think it's all that great. 2 grifters, that's pretty cool. We're going to definitely be starting those 2. We're probably going to have Travis Moon and then maybe the Fixer. We could also start Gina. And we could also play some in our deck just to get that cost reduction. That seems okay. This React Boot thing I think is a little more interesting though. We're going to have this ability to increase our hand rank. Kind of reminds me of Barton Everest a little bit. But man, turning your hand illegal, that seems a little sketchy. There's a lot of really dangerous effects that you can run into that are cheating based. Bottom dealing, absolutely brutal. This'll hurt in the morning, also can be pretty bad. It's not what you know. Again, really brutal. Your hand is lowered by 4 ranks. Holy cow. All of these are really, really brutal, but they're not the type of effect that are like easy to play and universal. So I think players kind of go in phases where if they see a lot of cheating, they play more of these. If they don't see as much cheating, they might not play as many. This to me seems like the type of deck where it'd be kind of metagame dependent, just because if you're not getting a lot of value out of this React Boot, I don't think the 2 grifter things is worth it on its own. Over time, if we get more solid grifters, especially for Sloan Gang, like Sloan Gang faction grifters, I could see this getting more and more value, but I think for now I'll stick with Desolation Row. Now we're going to move on to the dudes, and the first one that we have is for the 108 Righteous Bandits. This is AUSA Cook. She's a 3 of spades, 0 draw, 1 influence, 3 to play with no upkeep. She has Noon, discard a card, move one of your other dudes from this location. Here's yet another decent movement-oriented effect from the bandits. Not only does their outfit power do that, but a lot of their dudes do as well. So while this ability is not exactly in short supply, this seems like a pretty reasonable starting dude and just all-around dude to me. Getting the influence for the no upkeep, that's going to fit with virtually any posse, especially at 3 cost, and having this extra little movement thing is definitely going to be a cool effect. I could see this working reasonably well with the outfit power. If we have all of our dudes at home, we could use her to move somebody somewhere, and then use the outfit power to put another guy in that location. It seems like a decent way to maybe take over areas of the board that are not as easy to get to. This dude's certainly not amazing, but I think is playably good, and at this low cost, no upkeep, 1 influence, it's going to fit with a lot of starting posses. The next dude is EMERY the Turkish Bear. He's a 5 of spades, 2 draw, 1 influence, 3 to play, 1 upkeep. He has Kung Fu 0, and he has React. After any dude at this location pulls for a technique, pull and use that value instead. EMERY becomes a stud until the end of the turn. Here's another reasonably solid dude, maybe not the most exciting one, but he is a pretty cheap conditional stud that has Kung Fu, and he's got a reasonable value to back it up. I like this because you're going to be able to re-pull if you fail a technique. It's worth noting that it works for any dude, including your opponent's dudes, so you could hypothetically use your pull against their techniques. Kind of interesting. This conditional stud thing seems pretty good if you're able to pretty consistently make him stud. I could see you getting a lot of value out of his low cost 1 influence, and he's going to still be a 2 stud. That seems pretty good. Another just solid, all-around decent guy for the Bandits. The next dude is also for the Bandits. He is Michael the Badger Dodge. He's a 6 of spades, 3 draw, 1 influence. He's 4 to play with 1 upkeep. He has Kung Fu 0. While he has a melee weapon, he's a stud. Then he has Shootout Boot an opposing dude. The Badger gets -3 bullets if the opposing posse has more unbooted dudes than your posse. Pull. If the pull is not a club, the dude you booted gets -3 bullets. This guy's sort of a departure from some of the things we've seen with the Bandits, with this melee weapon thing, but it seems to me like that's absolutely the best part of this dude. We already have nunchucks, which really fits with the whole Kung Fu thing. It's just generally going to be a pretty decent melee weapon. This Shootout Boot thing honestly seems a little overly complicated to me. So most of the time, the way I envision it working is we're going to boot their dude, and our dude is going to get smaller. Now, maybe in a situation where they are doing a ton of dudes against our dude or just outnumber our Badger, that seems pretty possible. You're going to have to boot him to use the shootout ability. You're going to boot one of their guys, and then if they have one other dude that's unbooted, the Badger won't get smaller. So in situations where he's outnumbered, it seems to me like you're going to be able to pull this off. Pulling non-clubs, that seems like a pain in the rear. I don't really want to build my deck in such a way to pull non-clubs. Seems like clubs are going to be pretty good if we're doing anything Kung Fu oriented. So I'm not sure that the shrinking the opposing dude thing is going to be worth it. To me, this guy seems like he's a 3 draw that could become a stud. He's got a reasonable chance at succeeding at Kung Fu, and he's pretty cheap. I think this dude is probably worthy of including in your deck if you're playing some of the equipment, the melee weapons, just to make him a stud. I don't know, this guy's okay. He's a little overly complicated for my taste, but I think he's a nice addition to their arsenal. The next dude is for the Eagle Wardens. This is Jim Shivay. He's a 6 of spades, 2 draw, 1 influence, 4 to play with 1 upkeep. While at the same location as a spirit, he has +1 influence and is a stud. This guy seems like a perfect example of an unsexy card that's really good. I really like this guy. He's going to be 2 stud, 2 influence for 4 cost in a ton of situations. As long as you're playing a good number of spirits, you're not only going to have the totems which are attached to your locations, but you're also going to have dudes that just have spirits, and if he's at the same location, gets into a fight at the same location as them, he's going to be a 2 stud. The 2 influence, 2 stud for 4 cost, if you're routinely pulling that off, that seems really solid to me. 1 upkeep, he's at a value where he's really only competing with a dude, Lydia Barehands. You're probably not going to be playing a whole ton of copies of her. All around, this seems like a very playable guy. Definitely considering him in your deck. Just going to be a solid reinforcement dude that you're going to play like mid to late game just to get some more fighters, get some more influence. Good guy. The next dude is also for the Eagle Wardens. This is Enipe. He's an 8 of spades, 0 stud, 1 influence, 3 to play, 1 upkeep. He's Shaman 1. He has +2 influence during high noon. Then he has noon boot. Another dude at this location gets +1 influence. So the first thing to point out is that this +2 influence, which is obviously strong, is not going to let you control deeds during the production part of the turn, and it's also not going to help you for the win-loss mechanisms at the end of the turn. So this is only going to help for controlling a deed that has some ability that you want to use, or it's also going to interact with card effects that are based on influence. So for example, the Eagle Warden's outfit. Now the noon boot thing seems reasonably useful to me. It is limited to another dude, So you're not going to be able to just use it on him just to get him another influence, but you could just use it on another dude at home or some entrenched area where you have like totems and stuff. I don't know, this is an okay guy. It seems like he's pretty cost effective at 3 costs. These influence effects are strong. I'm just not immediately sure where he fits in with the whole Eagle Warden's setup. The next dude is also Eagle Wardens. Danny Wild is his name. He's a 9 of spades, 2 draw, 1 influence, 3 to play for 1 upkeep. Danny cannot be called out by dudes with lower influence. I'm not exactly sure how to abuse this trait, but it seems to me like it's really good. Not being able to be called out is just such a unique and really powerful ability. As far as I can think, only Clementine Lepp has an ability like this, and it's definitely one of the core reasons why she's a good card. This just, to me, seems like an ability that would make it easy for you to get set up to engage in a fight. You could move Danny there to have somebody to call out their dude, and they could potentially not engage you in the shootout first. It would give you some more time to get set up, get your dudes in position. It also seems to me like if you're trying to hold down a location, not being able to call him out is really strong, especially if you have some way to pump up his influence. And it seems to me like we don't have a whole ton of good ways to do that at the moment. But in general, this ability seems really powerful to me, and I see this guy getting better over time. The next dude is for the 4th ring. This is Dabney Scuttlesby. He's a 9 of spades, 1 draw, 2 influence. He's 4 to play with 1 upkeep. He has Mad Scientist 2. He can only invent mystical gadgets, but he can invent them and trade them to other dudes while in the town square. Well, if my search query is to be believed, we only have 3 mystical gadgets in the game, and I don't really think any of them are especially great for the 4th ring. Probably the most obvious one is Clown Carriage. I think we're going to see a card later in this pack that's going to make a little bit more sense with this guy, so let's talk about him a little bit more then. Next up is another 4th ring dude, and this guy is a familiar face. This is Ivor Hawley. He's a king of spades, 2 stud, 3 influence. He's 9 to play with 2 upkeep. He's an abomination, experienced 1, and huckster 3. If your outfit is the 4th ring, Ivor's cost is reduced by 1 for each abomination in play and in Boot Hill. He has react. After he enters play, play up to 2 hexes or abominations from your Boot Hill. Reduce those cards' costs by 3 each. Well, let me first reiterate that I absolutely love these conditional, if your outfit is something, it reduces the cost of the dude. I just love that mechanic. It seems like they're doing that with a dude from all of the different outfits, and just in general, I think this is a great way to make these high-end, huge dudes more permissible and more focused with a certain deck. This seems to me like it's obvious with the oddities of nature. We're going to want to play lots of abominations. We're going to potentially start maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4 of them in our starting posse. That alone is going to knock him down to 5 costs. While this guy is going to be good at 5, and you're going to potentially even make him stronger as the game progresses in terms of cheaper. Now, this react thing is a little trickier. You're going to have aced certain cards that you're going to want to play later. We do have some ways to do that, though. Raising Hell seems like a pretty obvious option here. Not only is it going to ace itself after you use it, but it's going to let you ace a card when you play it, potentially acing a really big abomination, and then you get back a smaller one that you aced earlier. Then you're going to be able to later play Ivor and put in the big one at a reduced cost. Just raising hell all around seems like it interacts pretty well with this. It also seems nice with Fun Time Freddy. This seems a little bit better if you have a long-term plan to get one of the hexes back. There's also a card a little bit later in this pack that I think works well with this, so I'll talk about this a little bit again when we get to that. Next up is a Law Dogs dude. This is Deborah West. She's a 10 of spades, 3 draw, 1 influence. She's 6 to play with 1 upkeep. She's a deputy, she's union, and she's blessed 0. She's a stud while she is the leader during a job or calling out. So just a brief clarification, she's going to have to be the dude who does the calling out to be considered the leader. Usually the leader refers to either the player who initiated the shootout or the dude who was the one who initiated the shootout. This dude just seems really solid and another kind of gap filler for the Law Dogs. I think that's a big theme for this box. I already talked earlier when I was talking about Abrams' Crusaders that I thought it kind of filled in a lot of the gaps of what the card pool was doing. And this dude just seems like a really natural fit for that outfit. She is already a deputy. She's blessed, so it's going to be easy to attach miracles to her. She's got a reasonably high value and has the potential to be a 3 stud if she's just the one that calls out. She's still got an influence. She's going to be a little costly at 6-1, but I think overall it's going to be worth it. She could be 2 influence pretty easy if you're playing the Crusaders. Pretty easily could be 4 stud. This seems like a great card for that deck. Just an all-around solid dude for the Law Dogs. I really like this gal. Next up is also a Law Dogs dude. Another familiar face. This is Abram Growth. He's a king of spades this time. 3 stud, 3 influence, 10 to play for 3 upkeep. He's a deputy, experience 2, and he's blessed 1. If your outfit is Law Dogs, Abram's cost is reduced by the total bounty on all other players' dudes. Then he has noon or shootout boot, unboot all your deputies at this and adjacent locations. I think this guy finally reached total butt kicker status. He seemed a little weak to me in the past, and this is just monstrously good. The stats are amazing. Even at this huge cost, I think you can pretty substantially reduce his cost just with the bounties. Obviously, we're pretty good at doing that with Law Dogs, and even if we're playing the Crusader outfit, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the bounties, there's plenty of cards we could play to increase our opponent's bounties. This thing with the noon shootout boot is really solid. It just seems between this and Rafi Hamid, you're going to have an incredible amount of mobility and flexibility with your deputies. This is just going to make your team really, really solid, moving all over the board, tracking down your opponent, and putting them in jail. This seems like a great card, a great finisher monster for this deck we've been talking about. And I think overall this is just going to be another solid addition, probably as a one-of, to that Abrams Crusaders deck. The next dude is for Morgan Cattleco. This is Dead Billy Jones. He's an 8 of spades, 3 draw, 1 influence. He's 5 to play with 1 upkeep. He's Confederate and he's harrowed. He has noon. If you control a ranch, choose a dude with a horse in this or an adjacent location. Move that dude to another location. This guy seems to me like he could see play in most of the Morgan Cattle Company builds that we've had. I like him in the landslide style because he's harrowed, he's relatively inexpensive, and our other dudes at 8 kind of suck. I don't really want to play either one of those, and I would much rather play a harrowed dude that still has an influence, and then he's also got these 3 bullets. I could definitely see this also being decent in the gadget styles though, just because he has a ton of bullets. And that's going to interact well with most of the gadget guns. And that's just going to make those effects a lot stronger. So this to me seems like a dude that's going to pretty easily see play in virtually every Morgan deck. He's not amazing, but he's definitely playably good. Next up is a Morgan dude that is definitely a familiar face. This is Lillian Morgan. She's a king of spades, 1 draw, 5 influence. She's 10 to play for 3 upkeep. She's experienced 1 and huckster 2. If your outfit is Morgan Cattle Company, her cost is reduced by 1 for each horse and ranch you control. Then she has Noon Shootout /Shootout. Play an action from your discard pile. After that card resolves, boot a spell on her or ace the action. A big theme of the last 2 big releases is that the designers are getting these big, high-end dudes a lot more right on. I think a lot of them are just way more powerful than some of the stuff we saw in the initial release, and I think just overall they're headed in the right direction with these high-end dudes. Again, this cost reduction thing is really solid here, although I do think that it's going to be a little harder to abuse than some of the other ones. Realistically, you're going to get maybe like 3-4 out of this. That's still good, but it's not maybe as good as some of the other cost reductions. This Noon Shootout thing is absolutely insane. I think if you're going to be playing Lillian in your deck, you're probably just going to want one of them, and I just really don't see playing the other version of Lillian. If I want a big influence bomb here, I've got 5, and I've got this Noon Shootout thing that's pretty much every turn going to do something awesome. It's nearly limitless the good stuff you can do with that, and just this is a big chunk of influence that now has an ability that matters as well. I really like this design of Lillian. I think this is a really, really good addition to the Morgan arsenal. Now we've come to the Sloan gang dudes, and the first one is Samantha Sammy Cook. She's a 7 of spades, 3 draw, 1 influence, 5 to play with 1 upkeep. She has Noon Boot, pay a Ghost Rock, discard a goods card attached to a dude at this location. Sammy gains 1 bounty. If the discarded goods card was a horse, pull, and if the pull is higher than the horse's value, attach it to her instead. This effect seems to me like what Faithful Hound should have been like. This seems like a really effective way at dealing with powerful goods cards, especially out of the kind of recently popular Morgan Gadgets deck. Now, this horse thing, it's thematically pretty sweet. I like the idea that she steals their horse and runs off like the art suggests, but it seems to me like that's virtually never going to matter. With most of the Sloan builds, your draw structure is so low valued, and most of the horses are pretty mid-range in value. So it seems to me like in general that's not going to be the easiest thing to do, but I don't really see that mattering a whole lot. I think just being able to knock a good off of a dude is going to be really solid. Now it's worth noting that you're going to have to boot in that dude's location to do that. Seems kind of like a liability, but after they lose their powerful gun or whatever, they might not be able to engage you all that well, and she does still have 3 bullets. So this seems pretty good all around. This is just going to be another nice dude to add to the Sloan gang. Next up is another dude for the Sloan gang, and this is Sloan. She's a king of spades, 4 stud, 3 influence, 9 to play with 3 upkeep. She's experienced 1. If your outfit is Sloan gang, her cost is reduced by the number of wanted dudes you control. And when she enters play, unboot each of your wanted dudes. She gets 1 bounty for each dude you unbooted. This version of Sloan is absolutely monstrous. I like this so much better than the original version. First of all, you're going to be able to get her cost down to, I would say, like 5 pretty easily. Most of the Sloan decks that I've played want to get their guys wanted. They're playing the Ames brothers, they're playing Milt, things like that. that are going to just encourage you to add bounties to your dudes. This entering play, unbooting your dudes thing, that seems really solid. You do it at the right time, you could get a lot of tactical advantage. Seems really good after a job, especially with the Desolation Row job kind of built into it. All around, this just seems like a really solid, huge finisher, a nice way to add a bunch of influence to the board for a faction that's very weak on influence, and you've also got a dude that's going to be reasonably good at fighting. All around, I think this version of Sloan is just a much needed addition to that outfit, and is just going to be a really solid card for a lot of Sloan decks. The last two dudes are the two that AEG were kind enough to let me spoil. And the first one is a neutral dude called Margaret Haggerty. She's a 6 of spades, 2 draw, 1 influence. She's 4 to play with 1 upkeep. She's Union and Mad Scientist 1. She gets +3 to her Mad Scientist skill while inventing gadget dudes, and each gadget dude at her location gets -1 upkeep. Here's just another neutral Mad Scientist that gives you some options when you're trying to put together that kind of deck. Gonna have an influence. Now, obviously, the gadget dudes aspect is kind of the most important part of her. And I think it's going to be important to talk about the next card, so I'll bring her up again as soon as we talk about that. The last dude is called the Wretched. This is an 8 of spades, it's 4 stud, 0 influence, 2 to play with 1 upkeep. It's an abomination, mystical, non-unique, gadget with difficulty 9. The Wretched must be invented by a Mad Scientist, and it enters play at the Mad Scientist's location. After the Wretched enters play, ace a dude you own and control in the same location. The inventing Mad Scientist gains 2 bounty. This guy has some obvious synergy with Margaret that we just looked at. But I also think that he's going to be reasonably good with the Dabney Scuttlebee that we saw earlier. Now, the thing that I'm excited about with that is that in an Oddities of Nature deck, we have a lot of incentive to try to control the town square with a bunch of weak abominations. And this is going to be a way that you can put a huge, powerful gadget dude in play, and you're going to ace some chump abomination. And then if you're doing it right, you're going to get that abomination back later with a variety of effects. So this to me seems like it's going to fit well into the Oddities of Nature as kind of a hybrid, a little bit of gadgets, but mostly kind of the abomination sort of thing. And luckily this is an abomination as well. This to me just seems like the type of thing where if you have a deck that can use it, it's going to be extremely powerful with this 4 stud, cheap cost. You really can't ask for much better when it comes to chump dudes that you're going to fight with. To me, it seems like the Oddities of Nature is getting increasingly good at just flooding the board with weak abominations, and this is going to be a way that you're going to have a hard-hitting combatant to go in that mix. That's going to do it for part 1 of my The Light Shineth review. Be sure to turn into part 2. We got a lot of interesting stuff going on over there. Some new deeds could potentially shake things up quite a bit. We've got quite a few goods cards to look at. And then we've actually got a new Joker as well, which is pretty sweet. So I'll see you over in part 2. If you like this video, be sure to click subscribe and the button that looks like a thumbs up. And I'll see you over in part 2.